Sanbonani, Dumelang Molweni, Absheni, Goeiemorgen, good morning, Dima Chelonavodi, Awe, Dima, yeah, I already said that. Welcome to my channel, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. And to my new subbies, my new subscribers, thank you, family, for being a part of our little family. Thank you for helping us grow. I appreciate it so much. All right, so guys, I know you've all been waiting for this one. I know I promised you guys a video where I'll be sharing my journey, or my experience rather, with depression, and this is it. So before I get into the topic at hand, I would like to clear a few things. Guys, asifani siyabantu. So we experience things a little different. We may experience things like familiar things, but the depth of it is fun, and is fun, especially when it comes to the emotional side of things. Fine. So I want us to actually respect each and everyone who comes forward to tell their stories. I would like us to give them, the sense of respect. We are compared. You say you've been through a lot, but if you would know what I've been through, you'd realize, we're not here to compare stories. We're actually here to share our compassion and to show empathy with everyone who's been going through a rough time. Okay, so with that out of the way, I'd also like to clear some of the things in share manje. I'm not going to go into detail with them, of course, but izinto ezinye that a lot of people are not aware of, especially my family. So please respect that I can't go into detail. Ezinye izinto I just, because I haven't really spoken to my family about it, and I haven't consulted them to ask for permission to actually air this to the public. So guys, you'll forgive me for that part. So let's get right into it, guys. My earliest childhood memories, I don't know what's being nangag. I think being 2 or almost 3, I'm not sure. But my brother wasn't born at the time, and my father had started a new job, and we were living just the 3 of us together, and I think we were happy. I was too young to remember, right? Yeah, I think we were happy because I remember we used to like playing tennis. My parents would actually gear up and would go out and play tennis at the tennis court. We had a tennis court just opposite the main road where we lived. I think now it's like an open field, soccer field or something like that. Those were good old days. I think I remember being close with my dad at the time. We were like besties. I was like a daddy's little girl. My dad would come back from work and he would carry me on his shoulders and take me everywhere to his friends, to see his friends, or wherever he was going, and he would buy me those little Simba snacks. I think it's a tomato, if I'm not mistaken, tomato flavored. If I'm not mistaken. So we used to be very close. We were super close. Fast forward to the first incident that happened that I think may have affected me was when I remember this one day. I think I was about 5-6 years old. My brother and I were playing out in the backyard lawn. So my parents' bedroom was in the backyard at the back of the house, and so their window was looking out at the lawn where we were playing, so they could see us. And so my brother and I were playing. It was a beautiful sunny day, and I could hear a lot of bickering and commotion inside the house in my parents' bedroom. They were fighting. I don't know what they were fighting about, but it was quite intense. And so it happened that the ice cream man came around, ice cream truck, and I went towards the window and I was like, Mama, Dada, still ice cream. You know, I don't remember their response at the time, but I went back to play with my brother, and yeah, I was sad because I didn't get ice cream, obviously. But I went back to play with my brother, we continued playing, and the shouting just became worse and worse until I heard my father say, get out of my house, get out of my house and get out of my life. I think at that time, obviously, I didn't know what it meant. I was still in creche. Obviously, I knew what get out meant because, I mean, everyone used get out. But the rest of it, I didn't know what it meant. But it stuck with me. Excuse me. A few minutes later, probably 30 or less, I saw my mom come out of the house and leave our family home with nothing but a continental pillow in her hands. Now, obviously, she couldn't take us with her because one, she couldn't afford it, and two, my dad had instructed her to leave us behind. So she left, and then life started going haywire from there. We had a childminder who was quite abusive. I don't know if that was her way of disciplining children, but it was quite extreme, if that was it. I remember this one time I was coming back from creche. I had fell at creche during exercise time. We were running and I fell on top of ispigili. A nail. I fell on top of the nail and it left a big scar. It dug into my knee basically. Like I still have that scar even now. That's how bad it was, that's how deep it was. So I went home. At the school they bandaged me, plaster, bandage and everything. And I went home and I didn't tell aunt because besinsaba. We were really afraid of her because of the way she disciplined us. I went home. Okay, the next day I was supposed to go back to a creche. So obviously and just when I stepped in the bathtub, she just like painfully removed that plaster. Guys, Nela's is Saga lama orange. That day, obviously on other days, my scared like it's cool like and uzophuma umzimba isikhumba sibovu ubuhlungu. But that day she removed the plaster so painfully and so hard from my knee, and I was in creche and she just started washing the knee. This is my knee, scraping through it, and then obviously it was painful and I started crying and it started bleeding, but I was told to shut up. And yeah, but it wasn't nice. It was painful, guys. It was painful. So my brother was still very, very young at that time, and so obviously they would pee on themselves or poop on themselves and stuff. But my brother wasn't allowed to, so he would get hit badly for pooping or peeing on himself. And yeah, it hurt. As a child, as an elder sister, watching that happen, it hurt. Okay, fast forward a few months later, my mom lost her mom, my grandmother, which meant my dad had to take us to the funeral. And that's how we got to stay with our mom again, because they had to leave us behind. Okay, sharp. Fast forward to when I was in grade 2. So when I was in grade 2, guys, my dad asked permission from my mom but at that time vele wayengahlali ekhaya straight, like kwakhe straight. it was kind of like why visit, like, you know, he would come home for like 1 or 2 nights. So sahamba ke fine, visit my mom, so it fit to go to sahambe noma mncane, my late aunt, who's my mom's younger sister. Asiphelezela sahamba for 10 days holiday in September. I was in grade 2, guys. Guys, you guys ungabikho milimili endlini, ungabikho rice, ungabikho ngisho iklabishi, isishebo, nix, nothing. It was cut dry. I remember this one time, my dad had come home for lunch or whatever, but there was no food. I went to him outside in the car and I asked him for money for bread. He said, Hanayon. Sharp. When I looked into the car, he had a big bottle of Gordon's dry gin, I think that's the one, and like a liter of milk. And he was drinking alcohol. Like, we have been hungry for a few days. That's another incident that stuck in my mind, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. Guys, my aunt cried when we got back home and told my mom what happened. They both cried. It was bad. Fast forward again, a year later, my mom couldn't afford. My mom was working as an enrolled nurse at that time. She had to look after Ubaba Ake, her home, her younger sister wasn't working at the time. She had to look after us, she had to pay rent and make sure she eats wherever she was and stuff. So it kind of got a bit too much when you earn close to or next to nothing. And so she decided, spoke with my dad, and they had agreed, my dad's going to take us for a few years until she can get back on her feet. Okay, sharp. We went to stay with my dad for 3 years, which was the worst 3 years of my life. The things I went through in that house, the things myself, my brother, and my cousin went through in that house, in that home. Yeah. It was hectic. Right? Aunt was still there from the crash. She was still there and she was still disciplining in the same way. So we were scared of her. Guys, as a child, I was an active child. In Nikiwa household. But those 3 years changed me till today. Those 3 years affected me so much. Affected the type of person I am, my character, my persona, everything changed. Everything was affected. So we experienced a lot of emotional and physical abuse, guys. We would get hit for eating we would get hit for the smallest things. One mistake, guys, it was so bad that I remember my cousin this one time. I think at that time he had broken his ring finger somehow. I think sasidlala or something, and his ring finger broke and it was swelled, it was swollen, it swelled up and it was all green. Guys, it was so painful. He would cry, but no one paid attention to him. No one took him to the clinic. He still had to do his chores, the same way that we did them, regardless of his finger being broken. Like, he was in so much pain. It hurt me. Guys, so he was washing dishes this one day, and I was wiping the dishes. So as he was washing the dishes, somehow a plate fell and it broke into 2. So auntie, she was sitting in the lounge, so and then she says ukuthi he must bring those broken pieces to her. Fine, he takes them to her, and then makafika lapho, he's told to lay out his hands like this. I can't show because I've got terrible nails, but he's told to lay out his hand flat like that, and wamshaya on the broken finger, even wamshaya ngalo iblade so painfully. Guys, I was so broken by that act, because I was thinking to myself, how can someone be so heartless, you know? But then if that was her way of disciplining, that I have to respect that, you know, I don't have a choice. I think that's just one of the incidences. I had to grow a thick skin from there, and I had to grow up because I had to take care of my siblings. I had to ensure that they were okay. So I would take the blame, I would take the fall for everything or anything that I could possibly take it for. I would have to, you know, protect them from getting hit or scolded. So I'd take the blame most of the time to ensure that they were okay. So that affected me on its own, in a certain way. And then things like, guys, I was forced to eat porridge. I hated porridge, white porridge. I hated porridge because this one time it made me throw up when my grandfather was still alive, and I was having breakfast with my grandfather. So I just went straight in and dug in, and there was no sugar, so I threw up, and I hated porridge since then. So then I was forced to eat porridge, and then this one time I did the same thing I did with my grandfather. I ate the porridge and it didn't have sugar, and so I puked onto, obviously. So I took that and I had to clean it out quickly so that she doesn't see it. And then I went to school. I got to school. Guys, schooling, it was so hard, like things were so hard at home that like we didn't even have imali care, like 1 rand or anything. And abanye abantwana would laugh at us at school and would, why nina nihlala nginamali, or why we depended on the school's soup kitchen. And at that time kwakudliwa amadog more, guys, and they had that, angisazi kwakuyini, but it was very powdery, and like mofaka amanzi, it became this thick, like I forgot what it's called, man, but amadog more was those little cake like things, yabo. So sasidla wona thina, and sometimes ayingabikho. So sometimes like abangani bethu would come and basiphathele, like mhlawumbe mabethenga basithengele izinto and stuff. But basically sometimes we would have to, like, ubone ukuthi udle phansi, from phansi, like when someone drops something because you're so hungry, you would ucoshe phansi ufake emlomeni. We were subjected to such things. And I remember after eating or throwing up that porridge, I went to school and I felt so dizzy, and I could feel that I was gonna fall. And luckily there was a teacher in front of me, and I just tapped her and I told her, I'm gonna fall. And I fainted right after that. And so I was taken home after I was woken up. I was asked, did you eat? I said yes. I was taken home, and then Miss Bianchini, my aunt, was like, I'll go to an aunt or whatever. And then she made me go get aloe from the garden, so that, you know, azongenzela something to drink, because she thought it was inyong, but I was actually just hungry. So yeah, I spent that day at home doing house chores, helping with the washing and so forth. Whereas I was supposed to, I'm not saying I wasn't supposed to anything, but I was supposed to rest because my body was weak and stuff. And I was scared that I would faint again, but yeah, God is amazing. He just gave me the strength to do whatever that I needed to do that day and to get through that day. My life was miserable at that point. As a kid, I really didn't have time to be a kid much. So things happened. A lot of other things happened. That just traumatized me so much as a child. That just stuck in my head and affected me, and my childhood changed. My life as I knew it changed, and I became this very closed up girl who hated people, hated being around a lot of people, who just wanted to be by herself all the time. I became this introvert. I became so shy and so scared of people. And yeah, I just became that dark hole started there. Fast forward, went back to my mom. We went to some school called Harding Primary, and we went there for a year and a half. My mom couldn't afford the school fees, but she wanted the best for us. So we stayed there for like a year and a half until she couldn't afford it, really couldn't afford it anymore, because she had gone back to school to study, to be a registered nurse, and so she had to take us out of that school. So we moved again, we moved with her, and we went to the Eastern Cape where she was studying. Guys, before we arrived to stay with her, she was staying in a nurse's home. Gona, it was cramped up because she had a roommate and the room was small, but at least she had like good shelter. But when we got there, we were subjected to stay just outside the hospital, where there were shacks. So we shared a shack with this other man, who the shack was divided into 2 rooms, and he used the other room. We shared the one room, the 3 of us. The room was so small, there was barely space for anything, and my mom was a bit sick at the time. She was a bit weak, but she kept pushing. Guys, I would watch my mom, or I would see her or listen to her cry. I would come back sometimes from school and she's home. Maybe she came back early from work, or she wasn't working on that day, and she would cry. She was hurt, she was in pain, and she had to move, and she hated the position that we were in, and she hated that at that time she felt she had failed us as a parent because she couldn't provide a secure, safe, and comfortable living where we were at that time. Things were bad. So we stayed there for 6 months, and we went to Durban to stay with my other siblings, my cousins, and which is our second home. We stayed there for a year, and my mom carried on staying in the nurse's home. She went back to the nurse's home. Okay, so to cut the long story short, my mom was broken from her separation with my dad for many years. It broke her, it created so much anger in her, and not just her, but all of us. So much so that every time we changed schools, I knew on the first day that I would be called into the office because my brother had been involved in a physical fight with someone. And that's how he channeled his anger. My mom, on the other hand, she became very strict with us. She became very, very strict, and to a point where we got so scared of her. She wasn't physical with us, but she shouted. So to a point that when we were still in Harding, when we went home, we would go home almost every second weekend when she went home as well. We stayed at a boarding house there. So every second weekend when we went home, we would actually prepare ourselves. We would tell ourselves, between ourselves, okay, so prepare yourself. You're gonna get shouted at for something you totally don't know about. Just brace yourself and embrace that shouting, and just, and so that also created in us a certain fear, a certain, I don't know, type of, but I had to grow up quickly because I needed to understand that my mother was also broken from her past relationship. She was shattered. She loved my dad. For the longest time, she couldn't get over him. And she subjected that anger. She misdirected that anger onto us. At some point, I even felt like, because I kind of looked like my dad, so I was kind of like, I served as kind of like a reminder to her of what my dad had done to her. So as a child, that would affect you. So a lot of things that happened after that, I took the blame for a lot of things, to a point where I started taking people's problems. I became overly sensitive, and whenever my mom said "Agana mali" or anything, as a child I had to understand that. I had to understand a lot of things. Her behavior, my brother's behavior. I had to work out a lot of things. But little did I know that was affecting me. That alone was affecting me. So after that, it took my mom about 8 years to finally let go, of her anger, let go of my father, and let go of all the hurt and the pain. It took her the longest time. But for me, everything else that happened, I blamed on my father. Everything that I experienced at school, everything that I experienced at home, everything that happened that I haven't shared with you, obviously, but everything else just led to me blaming him. And so that anger kept building up, and I started building up hatred for my father for putting us through, so much, until I was about, I don't know, and that on its own was a roller coaster, because I hated my high school life. I hated everything. I remember this one time, my dad, it was the first day I was in New Horizon College, where I graduated, where I matriculated. Sorry. I think I was in grade 9 at that time, and I'd gone to visit him because Harrismith is close to where my dad lives. So I'd gone to visit him for the September holidays, and obviously he was in and out of home. He wasn't really at home. I think I only saw him once or twice at that time. And now I had to go back to school. So I stayed there for a few days, and if it wasn't for Usisi's garden, at that time, basically me and her were getting along like a house on fire. I had also forgiven her, and I'd realized why she was the way she was. And she was going through her own, turmoil of things, a mountain of things that I also, as a child, had to understand growing up. So I had to understand a lot of things. So I remember this one time, I was now ready to go back to school, and my father was a no-show. He called me that day, and I didn't even know hore ngizogibela ngani ke tlo palama kae to go back to school. And so he called me. He said, "Listen, let's meet at the taxi rank. Ke tlo fa tjhelete ho palama." We went, no sisi, we took imali a cigarette because she used to sell cigarettes, and Sakibela, Ompelezela, and her friend, they had to go. She was accompanying her friend to do something in Sakombul, but her friend also didn't have money. So when we got there, I think we waited at the taxi rank for about an hour, and then there was one taxi left for me to go to school. There was no more going to be taxis after that. If I was going to be subjected to go back home. Okay, so my dad didn't pitch, and Usisi only had 23 rand to her name. Mind you, that's the same amount that I needed to take a taxi. Okay, so I took, she sacrificed that 28 rand for me. Her and her friend would walk back home, imagine. So she sacrificed that much money, 23 rand, her final lost 23 rand, for me to take a taxi back home. Back to school. Guys, I didn't have groceries. I didn't have money for groceries. I didn't have money at all for anything. That 23 rand, it taxi fare was exactly 23 rand. Because you don't know what's, yo guys. And I got back to school, got off the taxi, and I started crying. I would look at other kids being dropped off by their parents with bags and bags of groceries, and I had nothing. I would sleep that day with nothing. I had woken up with nothing. And at that point, I understood ukuthi uma akanamali. So there were times when I couldn't tell her with man because I knew I could wait for breakfast in the morning at the dining hall or dinner at the dining hall that evening. But everything in between, So I couldn't tell her because I knew she probably didn't have anything labe corner with my brother. And if I told her that, then she would go out and have to take another loan, or maybe sacrifice the little that she had left, and so I learned not to ask money. And that's how I learned this habit that I have. I'm going to pay money from anyone. I can't. That's how it started. So yeah, I hated my high school years. I had the most terrible high school experience, and after that I went to varsity. I was enrolled for psychology, but guys, no one told me what varsity. So my depression got even worse, and my mom was like, there's something wrong up. You need to go see a doctor. I'd have consistent headaches all the time, and I'd had these headaches for years, but then at that time they wouldn't go away. I would suffer from headaches for like 2 weeks or whatever and stuff. So I went to the doctor, and I felt Dr. Wanjel would see when I got to the doctor, and I just broke down. I just had the worst anxiety attack I'd ever had in my life. And as I was trying to explain the symptoms to him, he realized that I had major depression and anxiety, and he referred me to a psychologist, and that's how my brother and I started psychology, going to therapy, and we even saw psychiatrists and stuff. But after a while, we stopped because I was out of medical aid at that time. I think. Oh, that was the time I was enrolled in UWC now when I was dropping out for the second time. And yeah, so I was out of medical aid at the time, so we couldn't continue because we couldn't afford the therapy sessions, and I was out of school, so couldn't go to therapy at school as well, and Junior didn't have therapy at the school. But yeah, other than that, I didn't go into detail because I'm also looking at the time. It's been 35 minutes now of shooting this video, but I really hope Bubuti, my story has helped someone realize that they could be going through depression, they could be going through, anxiety, because I would have like major anxiety attacks, guys, at school, in class, and stuff. Also, just now, I think this year I've had about 6 or 7. In the past 2 or 3 months, I've had about 3 or 4 anxiety attacks, so it still happens. But next week probably I'll tell you how I dealt, or I learned to deal or cope with my depression and my anxiety attacks. So for now though, I'll leave it at that. I'm so sorry for the long video, but thank you so much for taking the time to watch and listen to my story and what I went through, even though it wasn't in detail. But I really, really appreciate you taking your time. So until next week, it's love and light. Thank you for watching.